too. Lovely to meet you. Now, you trained at the English School of Gardening many years before garden design was as well known as a career as it is today. That was quite a courageous step. What led you to do that?
Well, it's nice of you to say that. It wasn't actually courageous. I was never ever going to earn a proper living from it because, fortunately, my husband looked after me very well, and the children were growing up, and the youngest one, I think, was about 10, and I had time to do something that I wanted to do. And it happened to be the guinea pig year of the English Gardening School.
So you were one of the first?
We were one of the first, yes. And it was totally chaotic. It was very stimulating, but chaotic. And the head tutor, Rosemary Alexander, went away to have an emergency operation in the middle, and so she was off for three months out of the 10. But anyhow, we all learnt a lot. And I think out of the 18 of us, only 2 of us went on to practice afterwards.
Every year you very kindly open your garden at Southwood Lodge as part of the NGO scheme, which is fantastic, and it's a fantastic garden. And I know that you feel that you describe yourself as sort of looking after it, as it were.
Definitely.
Obviously there's quite a challenge in that, because gardens are also kind of living, growing, changing individuals.
Yeah.
So how do you balance that sort of preservation versus allowing it to be a living place?
Well, I think one can always bear in mind that whatever you do is going to be changed by somebody else. There are a few things I've done in the garden which I think might outlast me and will be kept by more people, by subsequent owners, but most of the things are ephemeral. They grow and they die, or they get chopped down, or they're totally replaceable. So I don't feel the responsibility in that sense. I feel the responsibility that it's a beautiful garden, and I think it's my duty and my pleasure and my honour to be able to look after it.
Fantastic. Well, and making the most of those opportunities is a real skill, so, hats off to you on that.
Well, and also the opportunity to open it for the garden scheme is useful because it does make it slightly more beneficial to more people.
Yes. And I guess building on that, evolving the garden, where do you draw your inspiration from in the garden and within your life, all the things that you've done?
Now that's a tricky question. In the garden, well, one obviously looks at other people's gardens and you see little ideas. For years now I've had on the kitchen and dining room windowsills, I've had little terracotta pots with violas in, which is not clever of me at all. I once saw it in Anthony Noel's windowsill in Fulham. He had a bijou miniature tiny garden and this lovely little touch of these colourful matching pots all on the windowsills, and I've done it ever since, and they get so much attention, and it's actually no credit to me whatsoever. It's totally copied.
Well, it's still highly successful.
But that was inspiration from somebody else.
So, tell me, what's your next gardening challenge?
It's difficult to identify a single challenge. There are plenty, but the one which must be apparent to everybody is that, well, we all know we're all getting older. I'm getting much older, and it seems quite rapidly, and I've got to do something to simplify the garden. And that really is difficult. And also the question of whether to abandon propagating plants, which is my favourite bit, but takes up a lot of time.
Yeah.
But if I didn't do that, I could do other things which I don't like so much. So that's a difficult decision.
Yeah.
Plenty of time in it, but less time at it.
Yes, but it's important to have those moments sitting relaxing, isn't it, and just enjoying it, and sit back and enjoy your work. What's your favourite UK garden or gardening style?
It's a bit dated now, I think, but this idea of dividing gardens into rooms, I think is very successful. Of the big, great gardens, I don't want to be cliched, but I do have to say Sissinghurst.
Yes.
I have always loved Sissinghurst.
Yes. Fantastic garden.
Yes.
And as you say, not just a sort of beautiful place to visit, but also a lesson in
a learning
how
place.
to do it.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Fantastic. And are you Alan Titchmarsh or Monty Don?
Well, I think Monty Don, because I like his style of dress. Can't resist a man in dungarees.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
It's very nice to talk to you.
Hi Mona, it's wonderful to see you and welcome.
Lovely to meet you.
Great. And just getting to know you a bit, how would you describe yourself to a complete stranger?
Well, as it would become immediately apparent to a total stranger, I'm fairly direct, which by English standards is not always welcome, and I accept that. But I would also say that I'm very passionate and very enthusiastic, but also, not always such a good thing, quite driven and quite obsessive, which is what I am when it comes to my garden. I mean, it's a complete and total obsession.
And that actually leads us quite nicely onto the fact that you are the holder of the National Collection of Carokias.
Indeed.
And I'm just interested because it's not a very well-known plant in the UK.
No.
How did you become aware of it, and what drew you to it?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because, of course, I always describe this plant as the plant that nobody cares about and nobody knows about. But actually, it's not strictly speaking true, because the RHS grow it en masse, and they have now used it very beautifully by topiarizing them in their walled garden as an alternative to box hedges or even specimen box. The truth is, being half Lebanese, I fell in love with my first Carokia because it looked like an olive tree. And then a friend of mine had one in Suffolk, beaten by the salt, the wind, etc., and told me that New Zealand plants were very well adapted to our climate, and I started collecting them. And actually it became a dare, because I started telling Sue Whittington, whom you've just interviewed, that I was having a lot of Carokias, and as a joke she said, with a raised eyebrow, laconically, Sue, National Collection. And I said, never.
Another national collection. You really go for things. And I guess maybe picking up on that a bit, I know that you're a trained opera singer, and also that you play bass clarinet. In fact, I watched you playing
the normal clarinet,
sitting
yes.
in your garden. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I was very interested, fascinated to know the story behind music in your life, and what sort of role it's played in your life.
Oh, it's played an absolute huge role. I started playing the piano, which I didn't really enjoy when I was 5. But then after university, where I studied literature, I joined the choir, the Geneva University Choir, and I had a boyfriend then who was absolutely passionate about opera, and in the end I decided that I would come to the Guildhall School of Music and Drama to study singing.
Fantastic.
So there we are. This is why I'm still here.
What would you say have been the kind of key defining moments in your life?
When I was 5 years old, my parents had the great honor of welcoming the Shah of Iran for dinner, and I was given the great honor of offering him canapes of caviar, which is like smoked salmon here, nothing special. And I was so overwhelmed and full of nerves that I actually dropped one on his lap. And he was very sweet about it and thought it was charming. My parents didn't. And I have never lived it down ever since. So that's how I started, and it's been the same sort of roller coaster ever since, I hate to say.
You continue to drop caviar wherever you go.
Well, yes.
Excellent. What's your next gardening challenge?
Oh, well, I mean, that's an easy one. I'm determined to bring Carokia to, the attention of the general public by showing their versatility. Because by doing that, they would have a garden for all seasons.
And I think you're right. I think they're actually becoming increasingly popular.
Indeed.
And
They're so easy to use. They look good all the time.
Yes.
They're low maintenance. They're drought tolerant. So what's not to like?
Yes, absolutely. So which is your favourite UK garden or gardening style?
Oh my goodness, that is a non-brainer. My favorite garden, absolutely without question, is Tresco on the Scilly Isles. It's the most fabulously exotic garden in the UK, and you really do not need to go anywhere to experience something that you would experience in the Caribbean, and it's absolutely breathtaking.
And then finally, Alan Titchmarsh or Monty Don?
Oh dear. For the sake of honesty, I will have to say neither, because I consider myself an avant-garde gardener, but my heart belongs and will belong forever to the late Geoffrey Hamilton. And for me, he's my hero. So
Yeah, he was fantastic.
he is the man for me.
Thank you very much.
A very great pleasure.
Hi Bunty, welcome. It's really great to meet you again.
Very nice to meet you too.
Now, you spent quite a lot of your time in central London,
Yes.
and yet you're a very keen gardener.
Yes.
How do you see the importance of gardening and nature in these times of environmental difficulties that we're in?
Oh, more important than ever. I mean, my parents were both keen gardeners, and because we moved around all over the world, they started a new garden everywhere they went. So I saw gardens from the beginning. But I think, to me, it's the ultimate escape. And, you know, I go down the garden with something that I'm trying to sort out, and some problem that's arisen or whatever. And a couple of hours in the garden and the answer pops up. And I go upstairs much happier.
Yes. Yes.
So that's, yes, that would be my real feeling about green space and quiet.
I gathered that you do some guerrilla gardening in Highgate, so perhaps you'd
Well,
like to tell us a little bit about that.
That was Sue Whittington's fault, because we both went to a lecture by a man whose name I can't remember now, but who wrote a book about guerrilla gardening at the Lytton Sci, and very impressed. And Sue said, "Well, come on, there's that roundabout. Let's do it." She then went off on holiday, and I got stuck in. And she rather left me to it after that. I think I carted out about 15 or 20 wheelbarrow loads of weeds and
Wow.
debris.
You say 15 barrow loads. I mean, that's a
Yes,
lot of
that's a
crossing
lot of-
a very busy road.
Yes, well, I have one place where I cross, where I reckon I can see anything that's coming.
Yeah.
And on the whole, people are very good about stopping,
Right.
which is reassuring.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was bottom up, you know, digging away at something.
Yeah.
And I suddenly realised that just in front of me was a huge, great pair of boots. And I was in another world, you know, and the traffic was going. And I looked up, and there was this huge man, and he said, "You ain't safe here, darling. Here." And he took off his high-vis jacket and put it round me.
Fantastic.
And I've worn it ever since.
Fantastic. When you're there, do you think people see you or not? And
Sometimes they do, yes, and some people, particularly if they're stuck in the traffic, will say, "Well, why," you know, and say, "Well, you know, it's looking nice," or, you know, something, which is very nice. And there was one lovely bus conductress who actually brought me a couple of sacks of soil,
Oh, fantastic.
which was jolly nice.
Yeah.
Because the buses wait outside Highgate School, and she watched me while they were sitting there having their break.
Right.
And it's not a garden. It can never be a garden.
No.
So, you know, leave the bits
Yes.
doing what they want to
Yes.
do.
Well, it's fantastically meeting you because I've seen that evolve over the
Oh,
years, being a
really?
Highgate
Oh,
resident
great.
myself, and
Yes.
absolutely love it. And,
Oh,
and as you
that's
say, it's
very kind.
things seeding themselves and going
Yes.
around. It's
Yes.
wonderful. It's
Yes,
wonderful.
it's coming on. It's coming on.
Yeah. What would you say is your best characteristic as a person?
Being cheerful. I don't know. Being positive. I think one has to be positive.
Yeah. And I mean, I get that feeling of when you were talking about doing the guerrilla gardening. That's obviously very much an angle of that.
Yes, yes, it is. It's just, you know, taking something on and making the best of it. And I think that's what you have to do in life. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Great.
yeah.
What's your next gardening challenge?
Oh dear, keeping mine going. I suppose, well, the biggest challenge is age, because I do the whole garden. I have help with the cutting the grass, but it's an enormous amount of work.
Yeah.
But it's very rewarding, and you know, people are very nice about it. So
What's your favourite UK garden or gardening style, or both?
my favourite UK garden. Gosh, that's tricky. Sue Whittington's.
Wow.
I think her garden's terrific. I loved Heel House before they started doing it up just north of Salisbury
Right.
on the river. Wonderful garden, and it was at one time it was nearly perfect.
And finally, Alan Titchmarsh or Monty Don?
Monty Don, because I like his books.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Ruth. Great to meet you, and thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure.
You were born in Nairobi in 1936, and then arrived in the UK after the Second World War at a time at which things like rationing were still going on.
Yes, and I was 16 then.
Right. And it must have been really formative experiences. I wonder what you've taken from those days that you still use today and has helped you through your life.
Well, I think it was always, everybody was expected to be practical.
Mm-hmm.
And you were expected to make the most of the situations you find yourself in. So it was a tremendous patriotic feeling. And so everybody was just working towards getting the right answer to life.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've ended up in, is at each stage of your life I've enjoyed, but you always try to make the best of that time.
And I gather that you also trained as a nurse.
Yeah, I did orthopedic nursing, and then I followed it by physiotherapy. So I was a physiotherapist, in fact, at St Thomas's.
And when in your life did you become interested in gardening, and what drew you into it?
My parents were my mother particularly was very interested in gardening. This house came with this big garden, and so necessity made me try and do something with it. But I was young and busy, so it's just a family garden really. It's not a garden with any particular theme.
Well, I think you underestimate it. I think it's a wonderful garden and space. And what do you see as your next gardening challenge?
Oh, I don't. No, I don't. I don't
Apart
have
from
a
this
gardening-
fantastic garden we're
I don't
sitting
have a
in.
gardening challenge. I'm 85, and I just love the garden as it is. And my only position now is to keep the garden looking so that we can all enjoy it.
Do you have a favourite UK garden or a particular gardening style?
Well, of course, I love Wardley Park, which is right opposite the house, and that's a most amazingly refreshing and peaceful place.
And then finally, Alan Titchmarsh or Monty Don?
Monty Don, partly not because I'm comparing them, but because he happens to have a lovely programme on the BBC. The only thing that daunts me is when he's getting his compost together. He tells me of all the different things I have to have in the compost. And I'm not awfully sure that I have that collection of...
Fantastic. Thank you very much. It's been
Okay.
wonderful talking to you.
Well, nice to talk to you too. Thank you.
Well, that's interesting, because I'm an Alan Titchmarsh person myself. He's got such great passion about his gardening, and he seems really interested in people, and that just draws me to him.